friends, welcome back. Thank you again for joining me. So today I am going to talk about something that isn't the most popular topic, taxes. Specifically, taxes when you have an LLC structure. So up until now, I have thought my business taxes were just set. I really didn't put a lot of thought or research into them. I simply followed the instructions of the accountant that I had and figured it was what it was. So I have an LLC as my business structure, and up to this point, my accountant has filed my taxes with a Schedule C. Again, end of story. It wasn't something that I questioned. It was just how I felt like things needed to be done. But then I was out to lunch with a long-term friend of mine last week, and she also owns an LLC that sort of operates like mine, although she does not deal in the same industry. The business format is pretty much the same. She has an LLC, and she casually mentioned that her LLC is taxed as an S Corp. Now, I consider myself to be reasonably on top of things, and I figured that if this was really a thing, I would have heard of it, right? So when she mentioned it, I just paused and thought, wait, what? So I asked a lot of questions. And at the time of this conversation, I will admit that I really wondered if what she was saying was accurate and legal. But she's an intelligent woman. She runs a successful business. And she was insistent that this could be a better option for me and that I should ask my accountant if it was. So I kept asking myself, same type of business, completely different tax setup? Again, how could I not have ever heard that this was an option? But the moment really stuck with me, and I did decide to investigate further. So I'm going to say that the number of questions I had really did start to send me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, because I'm not looking to overhaul my business. But on the other hand, if there is a potential opportunity for some tax savings or just other benefits, I wanted to make sure that I investigated thoroughly so that I could understand what I might be missing. So I started looking at various tax websites and various tax laws. Of course, I asked my friend Jen AI some questions, and then I brought this up to other freelancers who had LLCs. And I realized that my friend really did mention something that existed that I hadn't known about before. Having an LLC doesn't automatically determine how you're taxed. Now, what I learned is that by default, the LLC is treated like a sole proprietorship, which is how I've been doing it. I've been filing it as a Schedule C, or I guess I should say my accountant has been filing for me as a Schedule C. But my freelance friend ended up being correct. There's another option. You can elect to have your LLC taxed as an S corporation. Now, before I dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to make very, very clear that I am not a tax professional. You've probably already realized this, especially if you've listened to other videos of mine, but I want to emphasize, I am not a tax professional. Do not take tax advice from me. What I'm doing with this video is simply having a conversation with you like I did with my long-term friend who mentioned this to me. This way, you can use the information as you wish and talk to your accountant about it and see if this is something that you should or shouldn't explore in your personal situation. For me, it's something I've been researching, learning about, and talking through with my accountant. So I'm just sharing it with you in case you're in the same position I was, assuming that there's only one way to do things. And if you find it interesting like I did, as I mentioned, contact your tax professional like I did after my own initial investigation. Because what my friend explained to me that really got my attention and had me dive down this rabbit hole that I mentioned was the self-employment tax. Now, I knew that as freelancers in the US anyway, that we have to pay about 15% in self-employment tax because we're not splitting it with the employer. Generally, that would be something that the individual pays and the person who is in a full-time job pays, and they sort of split it, is my understanding. But again, not a tax professional. Now, that 15 or so percent covers Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes. So, of course, as I mentioned, as freelancers, there's no employer who's splitting that with me, so I'm paying both sides of that. And then, of course, I did know that previously, but I didn't know that with an S Corp, things are done just a little bit different. So where the S Corp comes in is that when you're taxed as an S Corp, the tax structure changes a little bit. So after my initial investigation, I wanted to obviously get advice from my tax professional. I have a brand new to me accountant this year because my prior accountant retired. So I did contact her and I did ask her, questions based on the conversation I had with my friend and my initial investigations. She did say that this was overall a possibility, but she wanted to emphasize some things that I needed to know. One is that you can't just decide that you want to be taxed as an S Corp and then, check a box and move on. You actually have to file with the government for this ability, and you have to get it approved by the IRS before you can even proceed. There are also forms, deadlines, and specific rules that you have to follow if you do decide to make this election. And she even mentioned that just the process of applying and getting that approval from the IRS generally does take a few months. So that was really helpful rounding for me. I realized that although it seems like there could be advantages, that this isn't a complete shortcut or hack. It's a formal, informed decision with real responsibilities attached if I decide that I want to move forward in this way. Now, of course, as with anything in life, or at least that's how I feel, there are trade-offs with doing this. There are advantages, but there are also trade-offs. And what she mentioned to me, and my friend in conversation actually mentions to me also, is that this isn't just about saving some money. It's about how you want to run your business, because if you are filing as an S Corp, you need to make sure that you are running a payroll for yourself, like you are a traditional employee. So, as my friend mentioned to me, I would need to get a payroll service in order to be able to do this. And there are also, as my accountant told me, additional tax filings. So obviously that would mean that my expenses on accounting would go up. And then because this system does require a little bit more structure overall, I would likely have more administrative tasks that I would have to complete. And as far as the salary that I mentioned, what was emphasized to me from both my friend because of her accountant and my accountant, who are different people, is that the requirement to pay yourself a reasonable salary isn't something that you can just make up. It has to be a legitimate, reasonable salary. So there's definitely more involved in this S Corp taxation than the simplicity that's involved with a Schedule C. Obviously, a lot of things to consider. And that's where I am at this point. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm still evaluating, asking questions. I'm recording this on the Easter holiday. I was with family. I have some family members who work for the IRS. I was asking them tax questions about it and just trying to understand how this would actually play out in my day-to-day business, not just on paper. In addition to that, my accountant suggested that I make a meeting with her after April 15th, which is tax day in the US, for those of you who may not be listening from the US, to discuss this further, get all my questions out, get all the accurate information, and then determine if I want to move forward. So why I created this video was to, again, share this information with you to see if it's something that you want to investigate, so you know that there isn't just one way to structure things, because I was misinformed up to this point. I feel like some other people may be uninformed up to this point too. And sometimes you don't even realize there are other options until something, or in my case, the old friend that I went to lunch with as someone nudges you and gives you the information and asks you to consider, looking a little bit closer. So if you're in the case where I was, running your business and thinking you're doing everything right, but not realizing there may be other paths worth exploring, not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, just different, then why not check it out and maybe be more aligned with your particular situation? Now, of course, if you've gone down this road yourself already, I'd be curious of whether you stayed at a Schedule C or elected the S Corp tax status. I'd generally be interested to know what you learned along the way and see what your decision was. So, as usual, if this video helped you, please like and subscribe. Please help the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.